Ciao, I'm Marianne Esposito, and today I'm in Ogunquit, Maine, in a little restaurant called the Cove Garden. And I'm here overlooking a very pretty little spot known as Perkins Cove. And when I look out and see all the boats in the harbor, it reminds me so much of a lot of the trips that I've taken to Italy. And I've been in many places, both north and south, but there are still a lot of places that I need to go. But just sitting here and relaxing, I'm thinking about a place I'd love to visit, and that's Genoa. And I'd love to know more about the secrets of that cuisine. And you know, I don't even have to leave home to find out about it. Dad, Ellen, Marianne, making a recipe. There's nothing here that's written down.
And with your smile look like Mona Lisa.
Oh golly, gee whiz. The rest of my wine, and don't you love my brush? This is the way they do it in Umbria, of course. Just baste the meat with a rosemary sprig. So that's good. Now, the Italians are such happy people because they have happy food. And just keep going like that until you... Ciao. Over 30 years ago, Oswaldo Riva brought the traditions of true Genovese cooking to America. And today, my southern Italian curiosity meets his northern Italian cuisine.
Toxic.
Well, what's so special about the ravioli from this region? Why are they different? What's so special about your ravioli? I make ravioli.
But this is the ravioli that my mother, she used to make for years.
Okay, so
she avoid a lot of things like the original one. Usually they put brain inside, the lacetti, so-called lacetti veal. Instead, she showed me how to make this one. We have boiled beef here.
Yeah.
Right?
So you need 3 kinds of meat for this. The beef?
No, beef and pork.
Just beef and pork?
If
How
you
about
have
veal?
You can put also a little bit of veal if you like.
All right.
And
This is very similar to the filling for my cappelletti. I use 3 meats, the same that my grandmother used. Beef, veal, and pork.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now we're going to grind this up?
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to be a lot of filling, but you're going to make about 500 ravioli?
Oh.
Easy.
We dump everything inside here. See? These they are very good with a quattro formaggi with mushroom
with 4
sauce.
cheeses, okay. Now you're going to put the marjoram in?
Yeah, the margarine, eggs.
Can I put it in?
Oh yeah.
All right. Good. Okay, now we're ready for spinach?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that looks pretty good. You're good with your hands. Very
yeah,
good.
hands, they are the best
That's
thing.
it. That's the best machine, your hands.
Look, Michelangelo, what he created with
his hands. Exactly.
Right?
Right.
Huh? Not that I feel like to be a Michelangelo.
Well, this is being a Michelangelo in the kitchen, you see? Because all of this is coming out of your feel for making a recipe. There's nothing here that's written down.
And with your smile look like Mona Lisa.
Oh, golly, gee whiz. All right, let's get this done or we're never going to eat. Okay, so now you got this dough is nice and soft. You know, I was really surprised.
Silky.
Yeah, it's silky. Yeah, it is.
It's nice and silky.
Yeah, and stretchy. Okay, so now to get this going, you're rolling it through the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're going to do now. You know, I have a little gadget that I use when I make ravioli. I put it on the form, but this is nicer to see.
Well,
this is nicer to see.
That is the old-fashioned way to make.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
The gadget that you put all the filling, you roll up with the mozzarella,
see,
and that they come all the same size. And the same.
This way you have the hand-made shape that looks. It's everyone's individual, right?
Individual, and so that is the people they should appreciate what we do because nobody doing
like
in this way.
Okay, difficult. So now you can cut them.
That I cut.
You just use your little pastry runner there. Okay, good.
And
now you want to make sure that you leave enough room between each one, right?
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Because
non si preoccupi?
No, non preoccuparti, cara
sì.
dolce fanciulla.
Okay.
And that you have your ravioli to put away.
That's good.
and ready to go, and they dry.
Now you're going to let them dry how long before you cook them?
They can stay 2-3 days. You put on the refrigerator, they are good. Yes.
You know, Oswaldo, you know what I've learned from you today?
What?
I've learned that there's a lot of fresh herbs in Genovese cooking.
All of them.
Yep.
The best is the best that you can have.
And you know what? I want to leave you with a little present to you because of the herbs.
What, you go to kiss me?
No, not yet.
Oh, not
but
yet?
I might. But I brought you a little present. Remember we talked a little earlier about basilico?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Basilico in Genoese is mean bageco.
Okay, bageco.
Bageco, and that is the pesto. Is a fresh basilico?
See? This is the old way, you see?
Yeah.
If
This is nice and fresh.
If you keep it under the salt, it'll stay like that for a long time. That's a year old, believe it or not.
No kidding,
Yeah,
really?
it'll change color just a little bit, but the flavor will be perfect.
Yeah.
So you'll never run out of basil if you keep that little jar handy. And you know what? Maybe you like marjoram in a lot of your recipes, but I like basil in mine. And
I don't know if the ravioli you got to make with the with the basil inside.
I'll tell you what.
We should
Have a
see each
competition.
other again and make a little bit of competition.
Well,
What you
I'll tell
think
you
about,
what.
Marianne?
I think it's a good idea. So while you're working on your ravioli, I'm going to go with you nella cucina, where I'm going to show you how to make a classic minestrone soup con pesto. I'll tell you, Oswaldo may be Michelangelo in the kitchen, but today I'm Mona Lisa in the kitchen because we're going to be making a big minestrone soup. And when you think about it, the word minestrone means that, just big soup, because this is a soup that has a lot of different vegetables in it. And I'm going to start with some onions in a little bit of olive oil. So you want to get, about 3 tablespoons of olive oil in a nice big pot, a soup pot, and dice up the onions, and then you want to get them soft. And then the next thing you want to add are some hard vegetables. So now here's 2 carrots that I have just chopped up, and then I'm going to add some leeks. And now I like to use leeks in soup, but by no means are you limited to the vegetables I'm using today, because minestrone is something that comes from the creativity of your mind, and you can use just about any kind of vegetable that you have. Now this is a leek. That's pori in Italian, and I'm only going to use the white part. And did you know that leeks are members of the onion family? And sometimes they're very dirty, and I don't think people like to use leeks very often because they don't know what to do with them. Now you see that looks fairly clean, so I don't even have to wash this. So all I have to do is chop this. And what I want are 2 leeks. So there's one. I'm going to put that right in with my onions. And here's a little bit more. So now I have 2 leeks in there with my onions. And I want to stir that around a little bit and get that going. And now what I'm doing here is I'm making something the Italians call a sofrito. I'm frying up the vegetables in a little bit of oil, sort of to exude their flavor and get those vegetables soft a little bit. So now I can put in my carrots, so they go in. And then I want to put in, some celery. So here I've got just 2 stalks of celery that I've chopped up, and they can go in. And now if you want to put these vegetables in a dice, you can do that. You can make them even smaller because then they'll cook in the broth a lot faster. So now I can turn my heat up a little bit and let that cook a little bit. Now, to this I'm going to be adding other things. Now I've got some potatoes, and here they are diced up in water. Now I have to drain those because I don't want that water, so I want to drain the water off. See, just like that. And then I'm going to have to dry these because I don't want that water on my potatoes when I put them in the olive oil. Let me get rid of that. Just dry them off. And now this is a wonderful thing to have in the wintertime, of course, a minestrone soup. But you know, I spent a summer once in Campania in southern Italy, far away from where my buddy Oswaldo comes from. And of course there they eat minestrone in the summertime cool, at room temperature. We always think of eating soups hot. I mean vegetable soups, that is, like this. But in Campania, I actually had this at room temperature, and I thought that was really strange. But my grandmother used to make old big pots of soups like this all the time, and there was always a myriad of vegetables that went into it. All right, so now while that's getting a little soft, I'm going to turn that up a little bit. We're going to backtrack a little bit, because do you remember how Osvaldo told me about basil and how he liked to use marjoram? Well, I like to use basil in my cooking. And so we're going to be adding a little bit of basil to this soup, but not immediately. But we have to start the process a little bit, you see? So I want to get my basil leaves out there so you can just look at those and try to smell them. And I'm going to be making a sauce with that. Now, while my vegetables are cooking, I should tell you we have to do one other thing. We have to put some beans in. And here I've got some, just navy beans, but you could use cannellini beans or white kidney beans. And what you want to do is soak, about a cup of them in cold water, just like that. Let them stay overnight, and then the next day, they'll plump up some, and then you're going to want to cook them. Drain off that water, get out some cold water, put them in a pot, and cook them until they're not quite done. You want them to be still hard, al dente, because you're going to be putting these back in the soup. So they're still a little bit al dente, but those are ready to go in. So I can put those in. In they go, the beans. And now, one other thing, I've got to put in eggplant. And here I've got a nice big fat eggplant that I've just diced up, took the skin off. In that goes. So now you can start to see this is going to become a very big soup. Now I just want that to cook down a little bit, and I'm going to come back to that. Now what about the basil? Well, this is a mortar, and this is a pestle. And actually that's where the name pesto comes from. Pestare, which means to pound. And this is a pestello, and this is a mortaio. And guess what? This happens to belong to Oswaldo's grandmother. I think she's deceased now, I'm not sure, but Isabella was her name. And this was hers, so it's ancient. And if you really are going to make pesto the old-fashioned way, this is how you should start. In a marble mortar with a wooden pestle. So now, the Genovese love to make their pesto with very small basil leaves. And now they're so fussy that they take the stem off, and oftentimes they go right down the center of that, and they take out that center vein. And this is such a small leaf, I don't think you can hardly see that. But they take out the center vein on top of that. Now, I don't have time to do all of that, but if you're really into making pesto, that's what you should do. So now to make pesto, you need fresh basil leaves. So for this recipe, you probably want about 2 or 1.5 cups of very tightly packed basil leaves. And don't wet them, dry them off. And then put them in a mortar, not all of them, a few at a time. And then you want to add a little bit of coarse salt, you see? And then you want to add a clove of fresh garlic. So I'm just going to chop that up a little bit because that's a big clove of garlic. And now you get that in, and then you get into this. And I mean, you've got to stand here now and pound this down. And what you want to do is get these leaves into a pulp. And that means grinding them against the side of this mortar. And so this is going to take a little time to do. And as you do it, of course, as you're grinding down these leaves, well then you have to add more leaves. So I think you get the idea here, because I'm going to have to stop now and go back to my soup and see where I am. But I will come back to that. So okay, we're going nicely here, and now it's time to add the rest of the ingredients for this part of the soup, because by no means are we finished. So now we need some chicken broth. And that looks good. And I'm using homemade chicken broth. And this is about 2 cups. And you want it hot when it goes in so it doesn't reduce the heat of the vegetables in the pot. So 2 cups of homemade chicken broth. And if you have to use canned, I'm not even going to answer that one. And in go 4 cups of boiling water. And then you want to add, just a little bit of salt and pepper, and that's all going to cook down very nicely. So let me bring that over. So now a little bit of, I like to use coarse salt. I just think that gives a much nicer flavor. Did you know there are more nutrients in coarse salt than there is in regular? And some coarse black pepper. And that looks very good already. And now I want to add, oh, tomatoes. I almost forgot. That gives it a nice color. So, oh, you want a couple of tomatoes, and sometimes I use, well, I like to use plum tomatoes. I prefer to use plum tomatoes as opposed to beefsteak, but I'm on a budget today, and I don't have plum tomatoes, so I'm using these. And you just want to dice those up, you see, like so, and then they go in the pot. And believe it or not, this is going to cook, oh, in about, I'd say 50 minutes or so, depending on how small you chop those vegetables. So now all of that goes in. But this is a big soup, so we can't help it if we're a little messy. And the rest of that, and I think I can pick this up and throw it in, and this one, you didn't even see that, did you? Okay, and now I gotta wipe my hands and just wipe this off a little bit. Okay, now, that I'm going to cover now and let that cook down some. And go back to the pesto. So now here we are, you see. And now, you know, many people say that this is a sauce that you never see outside of Genoa. But that isn't true, because I've had it in many places in Italy, even in the south of Italy, where you wouldn't find this to be part of southern cooking. My grandmother never made this, really, because she was a southern Italian. And there's an old expression in Italian which says, "Chi mangia pesto non parte mai Genova." Who eats pesto never leaves Genoa. So I think that's a pretty nifty little saying. I wonder if Oswaldo knows about that. So now you see how long this is taking me. And to be perfectly truthful with you, you could do this in a food processor, you know. But this is the old-fashioned way to do it. And I really think it retains the color a little bit better than doing it in a food processor. But I realize that not everyone has an old-fashioned mortar and pestle like this, but you can buy them. And you see how long this is taking me. It's going to take me quite a while to get these leaves all mashed down. And now I want to add just a little bit more salt to this. But now this isn't going to be the only thing that goes in here. Later on, we'll be adding a little bit of cheese. And actually, there are two types of cheeses that you can use when making pesto. Some people like to use just Parmesan cheese, but I like to use Parmesan and Romano because that's more authentic too. And also nuts. And we'll be putting some pine nuts in here. And again, there's another option because a lot of Genovese also use walnuts instead of pine nuts in their pesto. And now, I'm really getting tired with this, you see, but it is coming, and the smell, I wish you could be here. The smell of this is wonderful. If you've never eaten basil, well, it has a sort of a peppery flavor to it, and it's wonderful with fresh tomatoes. You don't even have to make a sauce out of it. You can just use it the way it is. Great in a lot of other kinds of cooking. So now, I gotta check this soup and see how we're doing. Well, I think it's coming, but now it really is going to have to cook for a little while. I better just give this a little salt taste test. 'Cause after all, needs just a little bit more salt, but not much actually. And a little bit of pepper. And there, I'm going to let that cook now while I go back to pounding that pesto. Now, let's see how we're doing here because we've got to get this finished. And you see now, I've pretty much pounded down what I had in there. Let me show you that. You see how that looks? But we're not there yet. We have to keep going. And so, as you're doing this, you want to just gradually add a few more leaves. And if you have to, a little bit more of the coarse salt, because that does help with the abrasiveness of the salt and the leaves together against the side. But not too much salt. You don't want to make this too salty. So keep going like that, and it's really important, as I told you before, to keep that green color. So now, let me go back and just see how my soup is doing, because I know that it should be coming to the boil soon, and yes, it is. And now, I'm just going to look at that for a second. You see how nice that looks? And now I think I can add my other vegetables, because there's still more to put in this soup, because this is still a big soup. So here I've got, a cup and a half of cabbage. And really, if you're making a minestrone, one of the things that's important to put in it are green types of vegetables. So that's why that's going in. And of course, every kid loves spinach. So we've got about a cup and a half of spinach. And of course, you see, I'm putting these in last now because they're not going to take as long to cook. And here's some zucchini that's been diced up small. That's another cup and a half. So in that goes. So then give that a nice stir. Stir that around. And now with these added vegetables, this is probably going to take not too much longer to cook, because they're going to cook down rather quickly. And you see how beautiful this is starting to look now. So now I want to bring the heat up on that, and I want to add one more thing. And that is some pasta. And here I've got, vermicelli. And now you can use this, or you could use something called stelline, which are little stars. You could use a tubular pasta if you wanted, a ditalini. And you put this in raw, and you just want to break the pasta up, you see, in small pieces like that. And the reason that you do that is you want that to cook in the same amount of time that it's going to take those vegetables that you just added to the cooking pot to cook. So you want all this to cook about the same time, and you don't want the pasta to be mushy. In Italian cooking, pasta should be al dente. So now mix that up well. And if you see that your soup is maybe a little too thick, you could always add a little extra broth to this, but I don't think mine needs it. So now the cover goes back on that, and that's cooking. And now to finish off the pesto, you've got to add cheese to this. So now to do that, you want to grate up some cheese. And now you can use either Romano totally, or you can use Romano and Parmesan cheese. And you want about 3 tablespoons. If you like it a little cheesier, you could add more. So this is the Parmesan cheese that I'm grating. And try to use fresh cheese. I think that's really important, especially in a fresh sauce like this. So just a little bit more. So then when you have your cheese ready, you see, bring over your other cheese. Here's my Romano. And now what you want to do is start adding some of the cheese, a little bit of the Parmesan, a little bit of the Romano, and work that in to the pesto. And then after you work that in, well, then you want to add those pine nuts. Or you could use walnuts, as I said. So here are my pine nuts, and you want, about 3 tablespoons of those. So in they go. And you continue to use your pestle to get this all incorporated, you see. You really want to grind those nuts down as much as you can. You don't want to make them too soft, but you do want to grind them down. This gives a nice added little texture to this sauce. Of course, if you wanted to make this ahead, you could. You could leave the cheese out and then put this in little bags and freeze it. And then you could add the cheese later on when you defrost it, you see. And then at the very end, when you're done, you want to add some extra virgin olive oil. And you do that, a little bit at a time. You probably want a half a cup of extra virgin olive oil for the 1.5 cups of packed leaves that I started out with. So continue on like this. You see, and now it's starting to get there, but it isn't there yet. So let me show you what a finished one would look like. Here's one that's done, and you see, let me get a clean spoon here. When you let pesto sit around, it starts to get a little brown on top, you see, but look at that beautiful color. And now that sauce is all ready to use, and I'm just going to give that a little taste test myself. Definitely tastes like pesto to me. Wonderful flavor of basil leaves. So now, let me see what my soup is doing, because I think that that's just about ready. Yep, I think this may be ready. Let me just check it and see. Yes, my pasta is nicely cooked, so now it's time for the kingly touch, because that's what basil means. And I'm going to put 3 heaping tablespoons in that, and that's what gives it its Genovese character. So there you have it. Today we've made a minestrone soup alla Genovese. And so until I see you nella cucina again, I'm Marianne Esposito. Ciao. So it still needs more margarine.
Yeah. Now you will see that when I put a little bit more extra margarine, fresh herb as a rosemary margarine year round.
Year round. But that's what I do. I keep...
But you are a wonderful girl. I should have met you before.
Not certo. You should have met me before. Okay. So now that seems like an awful lot, but this is really going to be a nice, tasty dish. That seems like a lot of herbs to use.